everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 31. Yes, you have suffered through 31 episodes with us, and we appreciate you for it. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a UCF National Champion, a former UCF radio host / ESPN analyst / this, that, and the other, an infamous rapper who unfortunately is infamously at home and not on the podcast this week, and an IG star shooting the breeze talking UCF sports. So we got a little good, we got a little bad, we got a little goodbye, and we got a little bit of a hello this week. So goodbye to basketball and hello to football. Excited about the spring game. I'll be there. I'm excited to see you guys there. And of course, as always, I'm excited to see the squad. So welcome to the show, Nobra.
Yeah.
Hey now, you got it 2 weeks in a row. So excited. All right, I think we finally got you trained. By the way, just so everyone knows, he is the mastermind behind all of the notes. If you guys aren't reading through the notes that we do show at the bottom of the YouTube and all of your podcasts, it has the times of where we go to each section, and all those clever little dad joke names for the segments are coming from Nobra. So he is brilliant. And we appreciate all the hard work he does for the show. So thank you, Nobra.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Ben Stout in the house. He's back. We missed him last week, unfortunately, for his insightful game prep into the Cows game, which was terrible. But welcome back, Ben Stout.
What's up? What's up? Good. Glad to be back, guys.
Glad to have you. All right, so who am I going to do last but not least, but always last this week? I've got two choices. It could be Trey Neal. It could be Alan Levin. Hey, Alan, welcome back to the show. Glad you're feeling better, bro. And thank you again for doing your show notes, even at a car dealership, from home sick, and now before the show. So welcome back.
Well, glad to be back, and thanks for not making me last.
Well, last but not least, but certainly last
on this show, anyways,
for this week. Well,
Gentlemen,
actually, the next 2
up?
weeks, because we're going to be missing Josh next week too. He's going on vacation or something. Like, dude, spring break was last week. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I might have to think of a clever rap to come up with, and since Josh is going to be gone next week, so I might have to do some research.
Can't wait for that.
Oh, is it gonna be like what Josh does, where he just bites off another rapper, or is it gonna be like a train?
Yeah, it's gotta be. I can't rap. I gotta bite off somebody.
You can't rap? What's wrong with you, Trey? You're from Georgia. You should be able to rap. Hey, by the way, for you and all of our other listeners that are interested in rap culture, Hulu is actually doing a Freaknik special that highlights the time of Freaknik in Georgia. That should be a very interesting show. I will definitely be watching. I was alive during that time frame, and I won't say whether I was there or not there at least once. So we're going to leave that there and move on to some sports. So Nobra, thank you so much as always, and bye-bye. All right. This week, we're going to start, as always, with our text talk, and for the last week, hoops. So these last few weeks were filled with a lot of conversations. So, guys, I'm going to let you get it started. Hopefully, you have one of the more colorful comments that we had, because they're always a little bit more fun. So, Ben Stout, since you were in the upper right-hand corner this week, what is your text talk?
So I wasn't very active on the text talk during the game. I was very frustrated, and then to be honest with you, I just straight up was so annoyed in the second half that I didn't watch a whole lot of it. I watched it later on, but so I'm gonna and since he's not here, I'm gonna call out something that Josh said at the end of the game, and he was relatively frustrated. Did we get effed by the refs? Absolutely, but I've been a wait till next year person, especially with who's coming in. But my gut reaction is to burn it all down at this point. So
wow,
reactionary stuff from Josh Lazar.
Wow.
He was, as we all were not. He was very unhappy with the outcome of the Cows game.
Yeah, I think we were all very unhappy, and I was very unhappy live during that game. The crazy thing about it was there were a lot of Cows fans in attendance, and it was pretty annoying when they left. And somehow I managed to get in the middle when we were leaving. I was trying to meet Josh after the game, and it was Kennedy and I had gone, my daughter, and somehow we managed to get intertwined with all the Cows student section piling out. So that was not fun.
Yeah, those fans always keep it classy. And
it definitely wasn't. Well, you know what? I'll say this. They did a good job being loud. That was the most excited and most and most vocal that I've seen a Cows visiting fan base be in a very, very long time. We actually had a cow sitting beside us, and yeah,
that just sounds crazy.
You had a cow sitting by us at the
listen. It was a dude, right? If it was a female, it would have been a heifer. But we aren't going there. We had a cow.
You just did, I think.
we had a cow sitting beside us, and he was very, very respectful. So I have to hats off to him. Student section was very boisterous. It was funny before the game. They made some comments about being behind the basket. What they didn't realize was they bought the tickets not behind the basket. They were in the section where we have the club area. So they were basically on the second level. So they were saying how they were going to be loud and mess up our free throw shooters. And they were just simply too high. They did party with our light show, and they actually had a lot of them had these little green covers over their lights. So, like I said, hats off to the Cows fans for being engaged and showing out, and obviously they cared and they won their Super Bowl. So, just like the Bengals, unfortunately, we lost the Super Bowl. All right, Trey Neal, what do you got?
Yeah, my text talk, I guess, since Josh isn't here, we're going to talk about how mad he was. He said, I cannot believe I paid to watch that. And this is, again, post-game Josh. I think he's mad. I mean, I can tell. And again, football is my thing. So, I'm like you, Ben. When football and it's going bad, I don't say anything.
Yeah.
Basketball, I just sit and watch, and I'm like, oh, I can learn something. I see how you guys react. And again, this is not first time, but one of the only times I've seen Josh or, over text be heated. I mean, he was talking about everything. I'm tired of the players. I'm tired, the coaching. I'm done. Like you said, burn it all to the ground. So that was mine. Again, I wish he was on here so I could just, see how he feels now versus how he's
so mad that he took the week off.
2 weeks.
Couldn't even do
2 weeks.
So, so that was my text on this week.
Yeah, I first of all, I blame this one again on Josh because he was there. Yeah, if Josh were here, he'd scream at the clouds. 100% true, no, bro. But I still blame him because he was there, and it was funny because we were taking pictures of each other across the arena.
Did he have a single conference win this year? Did he witness?
He said he had one. I don't know which one it is. That's going to be our fun fact of the week 2 weeks from now.
That's the thing. It's did he actually witness a UCF win in person this year? I
don't know. He said he saw
the
one.
Ultimate jinx.
I think he said he saw. Oh no, he sold his Oklahoma tickets. I don't remember which one it was, but he said he did see one. He missed Kansas. I think he missed Oklahoma. Yeah.
Thank God he missed it.
I'm telling you, I'm blaming it on Josh. All right. Alan, what about you?
All right. I had one because I was going to talk about it today I don't know who said this, but UCF 14 field goals to 1 assist, which I thought that was one of the stories of the game. And then someone said, more than awful, my living room has turned green from all the vomit spewing from his mouth, referring to the commentator that was talking up the Cows.
Yeah, dude, that guy was rough. He was bad. I think that was Rob Powers that said that, and then
Yeah,
it was in response to me saying, "Man, this commentator is terrible." Like,
yeah, he was
awful.
noticeably bad for sure.
Yeah.
And that's from one ESPN analyst to another. Constructive feedback there. BJ Taylor,
real constructive.
BJ Taylor did call some games along with MOD, which was fun to switch over to their broadcast and see both of them calling games on. I think it was on CBS Sports that they were on. So excited for BJ. He told me about that opportunity a couple years ago that he was getting quote unquote promoted. And excited for Mod. They both did a great job calling UCF games, and he still, BJ still does. He's learning the ropes, and he's doing a great job. I'm super proud of him. So
yeah, he's great at what he does. It was good to see him not only calling games recently, but with the postseason tournaments coming up and everything, him being on CBS Sports Network and in more of a analyst role, like during their like college basketball shows. Like that's really cool to see. That's something that if you ever have a chance to watch MOD do those kind of segments, like he's like a master at it. He's like really is just, there's nobody more prepared than Mike O'Donnell, but like to see BJ do it, he's also so naturally good at talking about the different things that they're trying to show on the screen and different trends that he's trying to show with each team. So hats off to both those guys. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's fun to watch UCF alumni starting to get into the ranks. You got Leger Douzable.
He does a great job.
In the football games, it was Deuce, right? So it's fun to watch those guys start to climb the ranks, and certainly a lot of pride behind all of that. All right, so that takes us out of text talk. Let's talk about the game. So, Ben, I'm gonna let you go first in an utterly heartbreaking loss, and that's not utterly, it's Udder-ly. So, Ben, go ahead and talk about those flatulent bovines from the West Central Florida.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the statistics of this game, I mean, well, before I go into statistics, I just think that this was like such a microcosm of like when we had rough games during the season. Like this was like this was just kind of a great shining example of that. Unfortunately, well, the opposite of shining, I guess, but it's really.
Oh, it was shining. It was a shiny turd.
Yeah, it was a shiny turd. That's for sure. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. I mean, you can look at the free throw percentage. I mean, we missed 13 free throws, or 11 free throws, excuse me. We missed 11 free throws in a 6-point game that, that's a huge difference, obviously. But honestly, the worst thing about it is that for me watching it was like just how it looked like it was just so, we were just so lethargic and kind of lazy in the beginning of the game. And they just jumped all over us because of it. It just looked like we were, I don't want to say not ready to play. It almost just looked like we kind of didn't want to be there, which is really disappointing to see.
Hey, do we get to start using the P5 excuse?
Well, I mean,
not yet.
Some people, I've heard some people try to use that, like, oh, we didn't look motivated, but I would never, that's just because to me, especially as somebody who, when I played basketball for UCF, like, I mean, our rival was Stetson, right? I mean, our rival was Troy State and Belmont. Like, we didn't play against USF, and we hated USF.
Whoa, cows.
Oh yeah,
Please,
I was using. You can't really hear the lowercase letters when I say that. Yeah, we didn't play against the Cows. I mean, we started playing them in football when I was playing basketball for UCF, but we didn't play them in basketball. And you could argue that it's not as big of a deal in basketball as it is in football, and that's 100% true. I'd agree with that, even as a basketball player. But by the same token, it's like I don't care how many transfers are on this team, on both sides for that matter. When you get a chance to go against that team, like that team out west, like you should be up for it from the tip. Like you should be up for it from the very beginning of the game. And that was what was so disappointing to me, is it did seem like we were just going through the motions at the beginning. And you know better than me, Roger, because you were there, and you were talking even about warm-ups that we didn't really look all that good. Now, granted, it's not an excuse to say it. It's just a fact that we were missing, CJ Walker is a big energy guy. Like, hopefully that would have been a little bit different. But by the same token, it's like there's no excuse for what happened in the first 10 minutes of that game, in my opinion. We were sloppy. We had, DJ's like, untimely turnovers happened in the beginning of the game. Usually that happens kind of towards the end sometimes. It just didn't really look good. And it almost seemed like we were thinking that a team that had won 24 games up until that point, like that we just felt like we could just turn it on against any Division I basketball team. I just don't really understand that. And it was disappointing to see that, but it was more disappointing to because we hadn't really seen that out of that team. We've seen slow starts out of this team.
Ben, let me add something there, because you pointed it out, and I did say this in the text as well. When I was at the game, I'm going to point out two things. One, I was I think it was 4 rows up in midcourt, right? And you can read people's faces and see it in their eyes at that point. When we came out on shoot around before the game started, we were bricking everything, and the Cows were hitting everything, like all their threes. I was like, oh boy, right? Yeah. And then during the game, I was watching the facial expressions of our player, and they were calm, but they were lost.
Yeah, it just
seemed looked lost. They looked like they didn't know what they were seeing. They didn't understand what they were, and it's not anything we haven't seen in the Big 12 all season. So I don't know. There was just no fire, no energy, no nothing, right? And then in the second half, the Cows came out for shoot around, and they were shooting with about 10 minutes. I think it was like 10 minutes left before the second half started. UCF did not come out of the locker room before, I think it was like a minute and a half or 2 minutes left before tip for the second half. So Johnny was laying into them. And the second half, they came out with a lot more energy, fire, etc. And here's the thing. It's like, okay, I get it that the players didn't come out that way, but why are we not having that hype conversation before we go out in the first? This is a big game for us. This was an opportunity to go to the next round of the NIT. It's against our division rivals. It's a big game for Johnny because, we came off that win, right? We came off that win, which was a good win. And then we go into this game, and it would look really bad given the contract situation for Johnny if we lose this game at home. And we did. So I just wanted to put that in there because I saw it in their eyes. They were first half was dazed, totally confused.
And I know it's a different era with the transfer portal where you don't have the built-in these players go against each other for 3 or 4 years, and it's that hatred builds up over time. But by the same token, I mean, last 3 times we've played USF in basketball, we've lost to them. And I know I just said
DJ played in those games, and so did CJ.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last 3 times we played against those guys, we've lost to them. And so, when it comes to basketball, there's we don't have much to say to them right now, which is disappointing, right? We have plenty to say to them in football in recent years, as in the last decade. Basically, we've dominated them, and we've got the accolades to back that up. And we have certain wins. You could talk about strength of schedule in basketball and the competition that we've played versus the competition that they've played this season. But when it comes to the game, it doesn't matter what season you've had. You're going against that team over there in Tampa, Florida. And so that was disappointing. And we don't know, Roger, because we say this all the time, right? Like we don't know what the pregame speech was for Johnny Dawkins. Like we don't know what he said to those guys. We know that, well, we don't know this either, but like we assume that he ripped into him at halftime because they freaking deserved it.
Well, I know he did, because there's no way they would have come out with less than 2 minutes left after shoot around. You and I both know that as former players. And same way with Trey. I mean, in football, if you come out late on warmups, you know you're getting your butt handed to you.
Yeah, but they had a chip on their shoulder. You know, they felt like they deserved it. They felt like they were a couple possessions away from the NCAA tournament, because they were. And they came into this NIT with something to prove, and they were licking their chops that they were coming to Orlando for their first game, because they looked at that. They are looking at the NIT tournament as like a debut of we're gonna show what we wanted to show everybody in the big dance, and they played like that from the tip off. And
oh man, I wanted to punch Pryor in the face so bad.
Yeah, and then in the second half, you're right. We came out firing, but we showed in the second half that we're just a more talented. We're a more talented team than they are. We have better individual players than they do, but individual talent can't carry you for a full 40 minutes against a Division I basketball team.
Listen, the Cows came out like feeling it. I mean, they shot 50% from the field.
Yeah, they're on
50% from the field and 54% from three, right?
And some of those threes are tough.
They had a lot of success with pickoffs at the top of the key, and then going under that pickoff and then just shooting the three, or us being late. So I would say this, though, no matter what, with as many threes as they shot, shooting 54%, and the next game they only shot in the 30s, by the way. You know, they were feeling it in this game. They were keyed up for this game. We came out flat. BYU, another great example, they just lost their last game, and they shot well above 50% versus us too, or 48%, I think, or something like that from three. And then against, I don't remember who they played, but they played somebody and just flat from three. So you live by the three, you die by the three. That's the adage. Over time, generally, the hope is you make enough points, but come tournament time, if you have a cold night, that really doesn't bode well for you. And we did have the athletic advantage, the size advantage, and we should have won that game, but it should have, could have, would have, didn't.
We shot 16 more shots from the field than they did.
Exactly.
That's wild. And we lost by 6. I mean, it's just we shot. We shot 5 less free throws, but I mean, we made. We just didn't play to our strengths. We didn't play together. It was just an unfortunate ending.
52% from the free throw line.
I mean,
that included people who normally shoot 80%. You know what I mean?
It seemed like
DJ missed 2. Everybody turned around and looked at each other like, what the F is going on now?
Ben, could you what is it about free throws? Just as a basketball player,
he's not expected to hit free throws.
No, I mean, just because again, it's almost. I played basketball growing up, and I was taught this is the easiest shot you're gonna get. It's not contested, besides a dunk, but I'm not dunking it.
Can you dunk, Trey, or could you dunk at one point?
Yeah. I dunked. Okay. I was able to dunk in 8th grade, but that was about all.
Okay. No, I mean, you're right. It's. I mean, obviously, it's the most mental part of the game. It's just you and the basketball, and you're just and everybody's looking at you to make what is perceived, as you just said, Trey, a very easy shot, right? Because it's one that if you're playing at that level, you've shot literally hundreds of thousands of, from the exact same motion, the exact same amount of dribbles, everything is the same that you've done. Probably, if you're a player at that level, probably, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times. But just like what we were talking about in football with Boomer, seemingly just like mentally gone towards the end of the season.
He had dead leg. I don't think
Okay,
it was
well, let's then forget I mentioned Boomer's name, but by the same token, like it's a mental side of the game that if you start to get into your head a little bit, you miss one, and then sometimes those compound into 2 or 3, and they're especially it's also moment in the game, it's timing in the game, it's like what the situation is, and it's just it's not as easy as it's a lot easier to shoot a free throw a minute into the game with as opposed to a minute left. I don't know if anybody stayed up late last night and caught that Houston game, but they had a number of players foul out, including Shed in overtime, and they had a 4th-year guy, but a walk-on, in the game, and he had to make free throws down the stretch. He wound up making one of them, which I was impressed that he even made one. I was impressed that he even hit rim in that situation. He played like 4 minutes, like the last month of the season, but yeah, that's a high pressure situation. That's way different than what we experienced, what we saw in this game, and it just seemed like there were certain things about it that like seeing DJ miss 3 of them is nuts. Like 4 for 7 from the free throw stripe.
Well, I mean,
you normally see from him.
Sellers at the beginning too. Sellers was missing them, and he's an 80% free throw shooter.
Well, I mean, he went 5 for 6, so he missed one of them. But he
missed one. But even seeing 1 of 2, like his
early
first
on, you're right.
I think he went 1 of 2, and then he hit the rest of the way. But it was during that spate of everybody missing them, and it was just like, what is going on?
I feel like it's one of those things where, like, basketball it's a reactionary thing. Like, it's so split second. Same thing with football. Like, once you're playing, it's all split second.
Yeah.
But it's like you said with kicking and the free throw. That free throw, it's like time just freezes, and it's no longer reactionary. It's just, all right, let's make the free throw. And then that's where, like, I think the overthinking comes. Same thing with, like, kicking a field goal. It's like you do this all summer, and then you get in the game, and it's like, all right, game on the line. I got to make the field goal. I feel like it's one of those kind of things too.
And we've had games where we struggled from the line. Clearly, this was one of them. But like we've also had games where we were good from the free throw line. Like
80, 90%.
Yeah, like high percentage as a team, not just like individually. I think the Kansas game was a example of that, if I'm remembering correctly. I think like Diallo even went like 6 for 6 from the line in that game. But regardless, it's just
Well, they took Diallo
at the wrong time.
They took Diallo out of the game early. They definitely attacked him on purpose. He fouled, got in a lot of foul trouble. Avery
fouled out. That's rough. That's our whole front court in that game.
Avery was good. He played really, really well this game with 19 points. When you were talking about CJ, the big thing that I kind of want to call out about CJ is at the beginning of the season when he started coming back, he was clearly had not played in games for a while. But where we had a lot of success with CJ was against the soft zone. And the reason we did was because he got into a groove where he could catch the ball, dribble one time, and then go out athlete whoever he was one-on-one. So a lot of what we were trying to do, we were talking about this pre-show, was we're trying to find mismatches or create mismatches, whether it's the dribble weave, whether it's where we've got 4 guys out on the perimeter trying to space the floor, and we feel like we've got a mismatch inside when we're playing the zone. What a lot of teams were able to do, because we didn't have the shooter, was they were able to play zone and push us out into the 3-point land with a lot of our guys, because they knew they couldn't shoot, or they would double team the ball handler because we didn't have a whole lot of ball handlers. We had basically DJ and Allen, and that was it, right? So since we didn't have that extra pass to a shooter consistently, they would focus and double team on wherever the ball was. And what we were able to do with the zone with CJ when he was the most successful towards the middle and part of the year before he got hurt was we could dump it off in that soft zone coverage to him, right? Since we didn't have that shooter we could hit reliably, we'd dump it off to him. He would take one step and a dribble and then just dunk it, and he'd be an athletic mismatch for everyone. CJ Walker can jump out of the arena. I mean, he can outjump pretty much anyone. He's got size. He's pretty lithe for someone his size as well. He can move. And when we hit him with one step, and hit him in the soft zone, that's where he really had success. And we were definitely missing that this game as well.
Yeah, I'll give the Cows credit. I mean, they had this kind of attacking, like it was almost like a half court press is what they were really doing. Like it was, they were attacking trying to push us more towards the half court corner, and that dead man's corner. You never want to get caught up there. And they were attacking those high wings. But what they were also doing at certain times is they would hedge hard against the ball, and then they would kind of recover quickly. They would recover quickly. And because of that, we weren't able to really get the ball inside the way we wanted to. And you're right, when we have CJ, we're able to, the most vulnerable spot in the zone is around the free throw line. Like that's where you want to try to get the ball. You want to get to the middle of that zone, because that way, especially with somebody athletic like CJ, because you want to have somebody that can kind of create, can shoot from the free throw line if you don't go up and guard him, but can pass off to a teammate or drive the lane from there. That's something that CJ does so well. I felt like maybe we could have gone to a little bit more of that with the way Chi-Chi was playing, and his length could have been a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, USF was attacking us. We weren't handling the ball very well. We were just off, and especially in that first half. And once again, because we got so, we had such a rough start. Like it takes so much energy to come back after after halftime and try to get back into that game, and it just wasn't enough.
We had 6 assists this game. 6.
Yeah, and then 13 turnovers. I mean, obviously we talked about it.
13 turnovers. Yeah, but turnovers are not like 13's actually fairly decent. We just had a lot of them early, which is why I think
it's the ratio, right? Like we're not sharing the ball very well.
Exactly. So, or we were trying to, and they were turning into turnovers. We actually, for points off of turnovers, we had 18 points off of turnovers to 11. And, this team has been built this season around defense and creating turnovers and transition offense off of fast break points, right? And we weren't able to do that. We played a lot of half court this game. Now that we did force 17 turnovers, we had 8 steals, which is pretty good numbers defensively. We beat them in rebounds. We shot 43.8%, believe it or not, as much as we've been talking about this. But we just got beat by the 3. They were 13 for 24. We were 9 for 25. When we shoot more than 12 threes with this team, we lose. And it's been proven statistically over the entire season. And we didn't play to our advantage, unfortunately. So, the game ended up 83-77. Alan, did you watch the game? Did you have anything you wanted to kind of input here?
Yeah, no, I watched the game, of course. I think I'm not ready to do the whole, P5, G5, we didn't care type of thing. Right. Because I'm a big believer, like a FBS, or D1 team is a D1 team. There's a reason that USF had 25 wins this year. They're obviously a good team, and I think that type of team is never going to be easy to beat, even at home. But it's like everyone said here, I mean, we were kind of thrown off our game from the beginning. USF shot lights out, over 50% from 3. I mean, some of the things we did were what we typically do. We won the battle in the paint. We out rebounded them, but we also chucked up a lot of threes and missed, and they were, hitting their threes. And yeah, it feels like we did come out a little bit lethargic, like you said, Ben, and, didn't really, have the mindset to win that game. USF seemed a lot more fired up. Their fan base was clearly fired up. You could hear that on the TV, and they showed it a lot, with them. So, but in the end, at least they ended up losing in the second round to VCU. So.
Yeah, the big thing for me, obviously with this game and the takeaway for me is we tried to outduel them in threes and lost because we had more possessions. We lost that, and the free throw line were the two biggest things for me. And a big part of that, to your point, Ben, this entire season and specifically in this game, is that teams have been able to harass the ball handler to the point where we're chucking up threes not in motion off of an extra pass. We're chucking up threes out of desperation. Yes, the step back threes are nice, but a lot of them are contested, and that's going to hurt your shooting percentage. When we're unmolested, when we shoot a three, then we're good, right? DJ proved that towards the end of the season. Sellers was shooting better. Avery shot better when it was uncontested. But what they were doing was they were getting us late into the shot clock, and we've done this all season. And then we have to hurry. We can't set up an offensive set. That's why everybody's like, why don't we see any offense from this? Because we don't have offensive sets because we run out of time. And that's
something I was just going to mention is the amount of time it took us to get into the offensive set was it was one of the reasons why we had such a rough first half. It seemed like we were, again, I'll go back to that energy, right? Like it just seemed like we weren't, partly because of their defense, but also just we weren't pushing, like we weren't getting into our sets quick enough. It seemed like we were just, when they weren't pressuring us, they were just allowing us to do it, and DJ would just, or Shamari Allen's just dribbling the ball, and all of a sudden there's 10 seconds left on the shot clock, and they're like, oh, maybe we'll do something in this offensive set, and it either leads to a one-on-one matchup that is typically a forced shot, or as you said, it's like DJ doing like a step back three, which he's been pretty successful at this season, but certainly it wasn't enough to compete in this game.
Yeah, and that's all guard play, so that's something to look out for. And we do have some guards on deck coming in. All right, let's go ahead and pivot off of this game, and let's talk a little bit about the season, right? So the season in review. How do you guys feel about the UCF season as a whole after losing to the Cows?
I mean, ultimately, I think we matched or exceeded expectations just overall. I mean, just being able to get, how many ranked wins did we have this year? 3 ranked wins, I think. 3.
Yes.
And those are obviously big games, and it was, so I think it's like a bittersweet. Like when you look at the season overall, like we got a winning record overall for the season. We had a winning record. I'm not sure if any of us really expected us to have a winning record, regardless of what our out of conference schedule was this season. Like having a winning record our first year in the Big 12, I don't know if I necessarily was like expecting that.
We weren't. We can go back to our preseason predictions. We said 4 conference wins. We weren't expecting it. Let's be real. I don't think anybody was expecting
the amount of conference. Yeah. I mean, with being able to in our conference get 7 conference wins, that's fantastic as well. If you would have told all of us going into the season, I think that would have been looked at as success at our first year in the Big 12. But the two, let's call it downsides of the season, or the other sides of those coin for me, the two things are just going to be, what could have been in the closer games. When I said, if you guys remember in the preseason like preview or whatever, the season preview, I said what I wanted to see out of this team was I wanted to see if we could steal about 3 or 4 conference wins, like win those games. But what I really ultimately wanted to see was just in our first year in the Big 12, just be competitive, like show that we belong on the court with these teams. And for the most part, we absolutely did that. But when you have 2 in a row, 3 or 4 within the span of 3 weeks, when you have when you have the amount of close games where we're like, yes, we were competitive. We went on the road to BYU and we really put it to them and we almost won the game. When you keep saying almost won the game, it just starts to get a little bit like disappointing overall, because you're like, man, like we had 7 conference wins. Yes, more than expectations. But if we pull off half of those 1 possession, 2 possession game losses that we have, we'd have 10, 11 conference. We'd be in the dance right now. You know, like we would at least have played in the first round of the big dance. I mean, so I think ultimately, you know, we'll look back on this season as a good intro season to the Big 12, and one that we had some players like Shamari Allen and Diallo. I mean, we led the country in blocks. That's kind of cool. I mean, we were a defensive juggernaut for most of the
So the fact that you have to say that's kind of cool says everything you need to know about the season.
Well, I know I just went long-winded. I get it, but I did say 2 things. The second thing I think that will be a little bit disappointing is that we're going just like the beginning of this season before we went into it is a lot of unknowns. It's a lot of unknowns going into following this season. We're losing basically our entire front court. We're going to keep 2 of our main guards, but yeah, that going into next season is a little bit of a question mark for me, especially when it comes to the big man, because we don't have any going into next season that I can tell.
All right, so I was going to transition to that next. Guys, do you have anything else you want to talk about on the season? I mean, Ben and I predicted 4 wins. I think both of you predicted less in conference. I think you were at 3, if I recall correctly.
I mean, like for me at least, it sounds like we're having the same conversation we had after football. I mean,
100% was thinking the same
like
thing.
that's literally what it sounds like. It sounds like we kind of went in with realistic expectations. The team flashed early, so we kind of raised our hopes. Maybe not our overall expectation, but our hopes. You know, I think realistically, we're like, all right, we're walking into the Big 12. This is the SEC of basketball. If we can get 4 wins, we'll take it. You know, you signed that. We would have signed that at the beginning of the year. But when we watch the teams, when we beat Kansas at home, like you said, Ben, when we have all these close games, yeah, in those games you're like, man, we fought them close. This is all we wanted. But then you say that, like you say that a week from now, twice that next week. Then you say it another 2 times, and you say it again, and it's like, you know, that's where I feel like we were with football, and it was like, well, if we could have just been healthy right here, or if we just did this play right, we would have won 10 games, 11 games. And, you know, who knows what we would, you know, and I think that's kind of what we were at. And I think that's kind of the hard part is what could have been is the hard part. That's always going to be the hardest part, because even though, again, you told us at the beginning of the year, this was our season without knowing anything else, I think everybody would be like, oh yeah, that's a steal of a year. You know, that's
you just look at the record. Oh yeah. I think everyone would take
it. But once you kind of, again, we lived through it. We saw the games. That's where you know, as a true fan, you see this could have been so much better. Even though the record was amazing, it could have been even better. And I think that's where you're kind of left wanting more. And I think that's where it's just the weirdness of going into the offseason. Like, what do we expect next year? Like, realistically, what would you expect next year from this year? You know, with who we lose, who we bring in, what would be your expectations? Because we've overachieved now. Do you set the bar higher? Do you set it stagnant? Like, what would you think, man?
I think, well, I know Roger probably doesn't want to move on to next season yet, but
do I? Yeah, I do, but not in our
well, no, I know Alan wanted to talk about the season recap, but I'll say as far as next season, it's hard to answer that question because of the way college sports is right now, and quite frankly, especially college basketball. I feel it just much like this season, like we don't know what our roster is really going to be going into next year. We know that we're probably going to have DJ and Jalen Sellers, and who else?
Sellers did say he's coming back.
Yeah, Jalen Sellers did announce that he's coming back. He had a lot of emphatic things to say about his feelings on Johnny Dawkins, which were all like positive and going to bat for his coach and all that stuff. And he basically stated that's the reason why he's coming back, which is great. And I'll say though that he also did say after the game that that ultimately he kind of was he felt like the team didn't quite achieve what they needed to this season. He felt like they underachieved this season. That's coming off of a tough loss, obviously, but I think he's speaking to what we're just talking about right now. It's like
exactly.
the underachievement.
They know their team. They know.
Yeah, the underachievement came from those close games that they couldn't quite finish out. Good teams close out games.
Exactly.
I mean, you were part of an epic football team, Trey, that knew how to close out games. Like that at the end of the day, that's what the 2013 and 2017, UCF football teams were so good at. And same with 2019 UCF basketball team.
Yeah.
And at times this season, this team as well. But yeah, it is tough to say what the expectation should be, right? Like, I feel like the expectations should be higher, like to finish higher in the Big 12, be at least on the cusp of the NCAA tournament, like be like one of the, a bubble team in early March, late February, like that should be the discussion. That should be the expectation. That should be the standard, because there's expectations that the fans generate.
Yeah.
And then there's a standard that the coaching staff and the program generate. And I would imagine that standard is much higher than any wild fan expectations there should be. And hopefully we get the right pieces, because that's the one thing about this season that I've said this numerous times. I mean, they're my favorite UCF basketball team since the 2019 BJ and Taco team, because they were a group of players that came together, with the exception of a couple of the rotational players, but DJ and CJ for that matter. But they're a group of players that came from all different places, and they gelled quick. They played for each other. They played hard. This team was built, and you guys have heard me say this team was built in Johnny's image in a way that I've never seen at UCF since he's been here. And if we can kind of capture a little bit more of that lightning in a bottle for the seasons to come, I think we're going to be in good shape. But the transfer portal, gives and it takes, and who knows where that, it doesn't seem like it's going to be much taking in the offseason, because we had a lot of where players are just their time is up with playing college sports. But who knows? We could Johnny has proven that he can find some gems in the transfer portal. So you add that with a Mikey Williams, you add that with a couple freshmen that we have coming in next season, it could be something big.
Yeah, and I asked that just because that's how I felt about football. It was I felt like we could have played better, but I don't really know what to set my expectations, because you set your expectations for next year off of this year, off of how you play, who you bring in. So like basketball, we played well. We played above what we expected, but how much more do we expect? Like, what do we expect more? And again, you answered it to it. So I think,
you're expected to reload every year, no matter who you are.
Exactly. And I think we overachieved this year, but the players think they underachieved. Like it's both of them. So it's like, I don't know how to say to it, because I think it's the same thing for football. I think we overachieved in a sense with our injuries, with what injured to a quarterback. But
you mean how many times we got injured?
Yeah, but I mean, like, we also underachieved because we had so much talent around the quarterback. How do you underachieve? So so I don't know. I think that's where, like, I feel like we're having the same conversation.
It's consistency and depth. I think we did have depth in basketball more so than we did football. But I will say this, and then Alan, I want to get your take. The thing about this is we are in a different era for basketball. One of the things that I'd mentioned recently to someone was transition offense is much easier, and fast break offense is much easier than half court offense, right? Secondly, defense is easier to teach than offense is, right? So, and Johnny Dawkins, we finally saw the type of basketball that he wanted to play, that he said at the very beginning. I think the difference is with as much roster movement and injuries that we've had, they focused on the defense to get to easier transition offense, and that's what you saw a lot. Calipari and Kentucky are the perfect example of this. Getting 5 freshmen, throwing them out there, and because they're 5 stars, highly rated recruits, they're not winning in the tournament anymore. They got embarrassed the other day, right? So,
25-year-olds.
Yeah. So what I guess I'm trying to articulate here is, with the amount of movement that there is in college basketball and rosters, I think Johnny tried to focus on the defense at the beginning of the season and in the preseason videos. What you heard them say was, we're literally, the players say, and during the early parts of the season, we're focusing 75% of our time on defense and 25% on offense. And I think that's a byproduct of the fact that you can teach defense more quickly and transition offense is easier because you've got 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or 1-on-2 basketball where you're either going to take it, you're going to pass it, or you're going to get a foul. And that's what you saw this season. All right, Alan, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like what everyone said, you look back and our expectations were way lower. I think, going into this, I literally had no expectations. So for me, this season was like a blast. I mean, there were just so many fun games, so many memorable wins. And just like I think we've said before, they were in every single game outside of like 2 of Kansas State and Houston. So for that, all that to be like just super pleasantly surprised. I mean, and when you compare it to last year, which I think we all thought was a disappointing final season American, like it's funny how close the seasons were when we completely jumped up in competition. I mean, we had 2 less wins overall. We only had 1 less conference win, and we only had 1 less non-conference win. So it ended up being essentially 2 games back overall of last season. And when you think of that in context of who we were playing last year compared to this year, I mean, it just made this season, so much fun. So, I mean, I think I look back at this season with positivity. Of course, there's the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and what could have been. But overall, I think it was a really, memorable first season in the Big 12. And yeah, I mean, I think the expectations get elevated a little bit next year. But, if we just taken this year alone, it was definitely fun. And I think we definitely exceeded expectations.
All right. So before we move on to football, one final thought on this. For me, yes, we exceeded expectation. I think I texted you guys in the text thread that this was the most fun basketball season. It's fun again because, and I said this on the show, if we lose more than 3 or 4 games, we're still in contention for the tournament, right? And that's a heck of a lot more fun because the season isn't over if we lose 2 or 3 conference games. So for me, that was a lot more fun. Ben, I think we also said this earlier in the season, why people, have a negative viewing point, even though we at that point won 4 or 5 conference games, was because they had exceeded expectations. However, they showed that they could do more than what they did. And so that kind of tempered that. I think that had we won the Cows game, I think the attitude would be completely different by the fan base. I think that people's outlook on Johnny would be different. I think this was the worst possible outcome for Johnny Dawkins that could possibly happen. And it's the last game before we go into the off season. Now, let's talk a little bit about JD. What I had predicted on here was that he would get a 2-year extension with a little buyout, right? 1 to 2 year extension with a little buyout to help us transition into the big money that we're going to get before we go shopping for a coach. There's been a lot of silence when it comes to JD. We were talking about this pre-show. I feel like that's because JD's agent is probably pushing for either more time or a higher buyout, so that if he inevitably leaves, whether we ask him to or whether he goes on his own, he gets a bigger buyout commitment from the next place he's going to. Right now, there's not a lot of clamoring for Johnny Dawkins as far as the head coach is concerned, because the narrative is he's mediocre. I mean, when you look at it from 8 years and then also layer on what he did at Stanford, he's got, I think, one tournament win, and that's obviously with UCF with that 2019 team. He's got, I think it's like 4 or 5 NIT appearances, a couple of NIT wins. And when you're talking about a head coach that you're trying to lead your basketball program, that's not what the expectations are for anyone. And Ben, to your point, and you made this point earlier in the season, the thing with where coaches lose their job is if they're mediocre, right? And Johnny, the thing about Johnny this season is he had some highs and we ended on a high. Had he won that last game against the Cows, I think that viewing point on the mediocrity would be completely different as to whether we were on an ascent or a descent. And I think right now, the reason you haven't heard anything is because the agent is doing everything he can to either get an extension for Johnny Dawkins or get him a little bit more money, because he is the lowest paid P5 head coach, and certainly in the Big 12. So I still expect Johnny Dawkins to be our coach next year. I don't know how much longer after that, but if anything, I feel like UCF should and could give him that 2 years and let him, if the plan is to get rid of, Johnny Dawkins, which I stand by my assertion preseason and on Nightline that he's not the coach for us in the Big 12. I feel like he should be given the opportunity to leave on his terms, meaning he gets to resign in a year or two. But that's what I expect to happen.
Question I have. So for football, I kind of know if we're stepping up in coaching, we get, if it's kind of a step down or we're taking a flyer. What does it look like like, say we move off Johnny Dawkins, who do we go after at UCF? At where we want to be, who do we go after? Do we go after a younger? I'm not familiar with it, so you have to tell me.
So
a younger guy that's upcoming, or is it like a big name Gus Malzahn guy who's coming back?
So
where will we go?
So right now we can't afford that, and
Which
there's
one?
a question, a big name.
Okay.
So
I'd say either Trey, either an up and coming or we can't afford either scenario really.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we could afford an up and comer.
It depends on who you're talking about, because
I get. Let me lay it out. Like, could we go get a young Scott Frost for basketball? Or
yes, we could. I think we could. I don't think we do it.
Scott Frost was a big time name coming out of Oregon. Like he was the architect of this Oregon high pace offense. Everybody wanted him. I mean, even more. After
he wasn't the architect. The architect was
Chip Kelly. It was Chip Kelly, but he was the protege that could get got. And then afterwards, obviously, he was the big time guy. But could we go get a young Scott Frost
I think it depends on the openings that year and what school they're coming from. Like, I don't think we could get like Duke's protege or whatever, or, someone like that. I think it depends on the school and what other openings are that year.
Okay. And like, what would be some names, I guess? Like, I don't know. I have to go look this stuff.
So
let me
go ahead.
Ben.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, before we have that conversation about names specifically, and part of the reason I don't think this will happen either this season or next season is because I feel like we have mortgaged and Terry Mahajer's play on this we have mortgaged the future. For this new stadium, which we'll talk about some of the stadium updates here in a bit, for the football stadium. But even if and when we get the full share, which again, we have to go through another athletic season before that happens, right? Right now we're only getting half shares.
2025, right?
Athletic year 2025,
yeah.
But that bridges 2025, 2026, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, we've got a lot of that money is going to be earmarked for the football stadium upgrades, and we'll talk a little bit about where that progress is and how it's being funded here in a bit. So even at that point, we're not going to be able to pay a coach 4 to 6 million like some of these other coaches are demanding, right? We will get more money into basketball, but it won't be that much more. So I don't see us getting a Kelvin Sampson, or going to get like a Coach Calipari or anything like that. Even at that point, we're gonna get like a G5 type of person who's an up and comer. So not an up and comer Duke assistant. We're talking about up and comer FAU assistant that is just killing it, right? And or a retread. So we'll get a Bob Huggins type who's got some warts. Be great to get a Bruce Pearl, but I don't even think we could get a Bruce Pearl at this point. You know what I mean?
SEC champion coach Bruce
No,
Pearl.
but
we're not getting Bruce Pearl.
No, but I mean, Bruce Pearl, the type that got in trouble, got knocked down, down into the G5 leagues, and then it's coming back up, right? We're not going to be able to even afford someone like that. It'll be like a Bob Huggins type of person who's towards the end of their thing. So I hate to paint that bleak of a picture, because there's a lot of great things about UCF basketball. I just don't know if we're going to have the rev, because we're going to be focused on the stadium coming up. And Ben, I'll yield the floor to you. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to put that point out there that we're talking about this, but it's not going to happen for a year or two. And even then, to me, it's going to be a G5 type coach, because Terry Mohajir's legacy and his ability to get his next job is going to be based on getting those facilities upgraded and put in place, because he is going to have a huge feather in his cap with the tax dollars that he went and got from the city of Orlando to build what we're building. So go ahead, Ben. I'll take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, like it always happens this time of year, right, where you start to get familiar with certain coaches in the mid-majors, and they're head coaches. They're not assistant coaches. So that's the biggest difference, Trey, between when you talk about coaching, like coaching searches between basketball and football. And to me anyways, and I was actually thinking about this randomly earlier today, is that like what we just described with Dawkins, right? Like he's an amazing defensive coach, and like his teams always play great defense, but like they struggle on offense, right? Like what if that happened on any high level football team, and the head coach isn't in danger of getting fired? What would happen? You'd have a mix up with the offensive coordinator, the offensive staff. Yeah. And like we did this shoot, like we're doing basically moving forward in football. And so, and on top of that, you like us as fans, even somebody like me who pays attention and loves college football, and I'm a big college football fan. Like I know plenty of us. I can name a lot of assistant coaches throughout the country in football. I couldn't name you one outside of UCF staff. Like I couldn't unless I knew them, right? Like I couldn't.
Dusty May,
basketball coach. What's that?
I mean, are you talking about head coach at a G5 or you
head coach, Roger? Excuse me. I said assistant coaches. You can't name assistant coaches throughout the country. You can name a bunch of college football assistant coaches. Yep. Yeah, but Dusty May, since you brought him up, I was going to bring him up, Roger, already. But I mean, he just signed a fat contract to coach Michigan. He's going to be the next head coach at Michigan. And he brought FAU on a magical Final Four run last season. They brought their entire team back, and they were an 8 seed, going into the NCAA tournament this year. They were ranked for most of the year. That's FAU. And then all of a sudden, whenever that happens, just like it happened to us with Frost and coaches prior to that, any mid-major that happens, that's when they get that big step up. And so if UCF were to move on from Dawkins, they would be, I agree with you, Roger, they would be looking at the mid-major teams that are in the NCAA tournament essentially this season, or just have been one of those teams that have been up and coming. And the reason why is because that coach, hopefully would be a young coach, youngish, if you will. And and he's built that program where all of a sudden they're making noise. They're making the NCAA tournament. They're on the cusp of being ranked. They have a couple of big wins, and then they make some noise in the NCAA tournament. All of a sudden, that coach is a hot commodity. The problem is for UCF, and this describes exactly what Roger's talking about as far as the timing of if we were to move on to Dawkins, when should that be, and why should that not be now? Is because even if we were interested in, I'm trying to think of a team like Yale's coach that won their first round game, Oakland's coach that beat Kentucky in the first round. Like, I don't know how great they've been over the last 5-6 years at those schools, but for that matter, if you're trying to go get one of those mid-major coaches that have made a big splash from one year to the next, you're not the only P2, P3, P4 team trying to go after those guys. Yeah. You're not the only one, and you're not going to get them for $1.6 million a year. You're just not. Like, they're not going to step up to a school like UCF, who's in the best conference in America, only getting stronger, by the way. We're about to add Arizona. We're about to add a bunch of basketball schools. We're going to have 20 conference games next season. You're not going to come into a school like UCF that's in the Big 12 if you're one of those mid-major coaches that is on the come up and only accept what Johnny Dawkins is making. And that's the situation that is the reality that we're in right now, which is all to say that I agree with Roger, which is a rare thing sometimes, especially when it comes to Johnny Dawkins, that I think that ultimately they are going to decide on the right number. And he's probably going to get a 2-year extension with a somewhat reasonable buyout. And that's what we're looking at for next season. If for some reason that contract doesn't happen, I think it'd be a little surprising that he'd be completely a lame duck coach going into next season. But if for some reason that doesn't, I hope that the conversation with Mahajer and Johnny Dawkins is clear expectations of what he needs to see next season. And whether he gets a contract or not, I hope that conversation is very clear and standards of what he expects to see, whether that be, amount of wins or standings or whatever that may be.
Dawkins is selling recruiting right now. Dawkins is selling recruiting right now.
Yeah,
that's what he's selling because he's got some good recruits coming in. He's got Mikey Williams coming in, etc. That's what he's selling for the next season in this contract negotiation. That's what his agent is selling, et cetera, right? And that's a place that we kind of missed out on. And you got to remember, we had 3 players. One that Joey Hart, who was a 3-point shooter that was supposed to come in, didn't end up coming in. He played decent in the sparing minutes that he had at Dayton that he went to. We had another player who was supposed to come in that ended up switching to another team and got a lot of minutes and played really, really well there. I can't remember his name.
That played for Memphis, right? Like that.
Yeah, that kid.
That freshman dude was a stud. Yeah, he was a significant player for Memphis. Yeah.
So again, there was a little bit of, I wouldn't call it bad luck. I mean, I've got to kind of push on UCF a little bit for letting people out of their NLIs for that. But and I don't know if that's a Johnny decision or if that's a Timo decision, but either way, if people sign, you got to make them stay. I don't care if it pisses them off for this particular season. You got to make them stay because otherwise other people aren't going to respect you. And it's going to be, you get a reputation for that.
Yeah. I just think to your point though, Roger, like if Johnny and his agent they are selling recruiting, in the future, then if I'm Timo, I'm just saying, okay, I understand. I hear you. They're highly ranked players that, we got a guy like Mikey Williams, as long as he can keep his head on straight. Like he seems like he could be an explosive player for us, a game changer. But But what does that mean in terms of wins? What does that mean in terms of success? What does that mean in terms of moving forward? And then they need to set those clear standards. And hey, if he achieves it, then he's earned the extension or whatever he's seeking. But if he if he falls short of it, then there's justification for Mahajer and UCF to move on. But I think next season, there's no doubt in my mind that Johnny Dawkins has earned next season. And to be honest with you, he's earned a couple years extension to kind of continue to build it. But I think it'll be interesting to see. I think next season is more of a make or break year than he's ever had here at UCF, and there's no doubt about that.
So I don't think he's earned it, but I think we're stuck with him. So let's just put it that way. That's where
I'm finally disagree on something. All right, we're back.
Kind of like what y'all are saying. If it's say next year is just they play out of their mind. I mean, you get Mikey Williams, and then you bring back some guys. Say there goes like a 2019 run. If you don't sign an extension, does that not make Johnny Dawkins ask for more money than he asked for? Not like in my head of leverage. Like would he almost phase himself out of paying that? Like, would you pay $2-3 million a year? I don't know the exact numbers, but to keep him, if we know he's kind of mediocre, but he is recruiting very well, like you get the kind of dilemma.
Dude, you got 2 years. You've had 8 years to show it, and to me, it's time to move on. We just don't have the money to do it. Right. And I've said this all along. I've said this before we got into the Big 12 on Nightline. He would be the transition coach. And remember, this is year one of that transition. And we've got another year of transition fiscally, coming up because we're going from 18 million a year to 32 million a year, coming up. So it's a moot point at this point because we're talking about 2 years in a row, and hopefully Johnny kills it because I like him. Like I've shaken his hand. I know his wife. Like I love them.
I don't really think there's anything UCF basketball can do to ever convince you that he should be here long term, though. I don't really care what they do. I don't think there's anything that UCF basketball can do to make you think that Johnny Dawkins is our long-term coach. And I'm not saying that I really think he's going to be here or like I really am going to back him long-term like that, but I just don't think there's anything that he can do for you.
That's how I feel
Go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry.
No, that's how I feel about myself. Like, I just feel like
you're not going to be the long-term head coach for the UCF basketball team in the Big 12.
No, I'm saying about how what Ben's saying, what said about you is how I kind of feel too, is just like short of some sort of miracle run next year where we get deep into the tournament. Like, I just feel at this point, he's a coach that's kind of aging out and he hasn't really had a ton of success as a coach. Nothing to do with him as a person or him as a player. I know he was, a legend, but I just feel you couldn't get it done, other than a year or two in the American. I just, at this point, it feels like we're just in a transition phase and there's no going back. And I don't think there's anything he can do to really convince me at this point. I don't see why any other coach couldn't get some of the same exact recruits he's getting now with the conference that we're in and what we can sell, unless they're just absolutely awful at recruiting. So what he brings to the table, I think, is matchable by another coach. And I'd rather go for a new, fresh vision at some point. But with Ben, I do agree with you. He 100% has earned another season or two. There's no doubt about that. You're not going to fire him after the type of season he had. But on the same token, we're also stuck with him. So it's kind of like he earned it and we're stuck with him. So you just status quo until.
Alan, I'm not going to lie. We might be having the same conversation a year from now in football, and I alluded to it earlier in the season. We might be having the same with Gus Malzahn. Like,
yeah, but we could get a football coach. The money would be there. I mean,
absolutely. I'm just saying, like, as far as the
conversation,
very well.
Yeah,
he's bringing all these recruits in, but we're kind of under. Like,
I see what you're saying.
Not to make it football.
4 losses guaranteed.
What is
basically
as far as Gus Malzahn's tenure? What has it been so far?
It's been the recruiting that's made him so exciting. It's the recruiting.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Let's back up.
Not to go off, but I'm just saying. We might be having the same conversation.
But let's back up a second. Johnny Dawkins' problem is he wasn't just mediocre at UCF. He was also mediocre at Stanford.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the difference. Gus Malzahn was not. Okay. As far as an SEC program, without it being Alabama, right, or Georgia or somewhere like that, he was known for the guy that punched guys in the mouth, right? And also we saw him at Tulsa as a coordinator, right? He's not mediocre from that perspective. Now, what I will say about this,
his past isn't mediocre, but it's not.
Johnny Dawkins lost Stink, and if anybody doesn't know who Stink is, Kevin Norris, who is the best recruiter for UCF basketball. Okay, that happened this week, right? So Johnny Dawkins, again, respectable guy. He doesn't have the ability to reload the assistant coaching tree like what Gus Malzahn can. So what I'm going to say about Gus too is we had a metric ton of injuries and we did not have the depth of the P5. You heard me say that earlier about depth. We did not have the depth in football. It requires a lot more players than what we did in basketball. This year we had depth. We were able to rotate. Early on, we had the bench was outscoring. I don't know if you guys remember these conversations, but the bench was outscoring the starters in the first half of the season. We don't have that in football. We finally got a QB that's an actual QB, right? That I think has the size that we need to be able to run the type of offense that he needs to and survive a season. So I feel like it's a different animal, and I think there's more time for Gus Malzahn than there is for Johnny Dawkins. And
there's 100% more time. 100%. You know what? Also, there's way more resources, as there should be on the football side. I'm not saying that there's. Listen, we're never going to get resources in percentage wise, like on the basketball side. Like it's just not, and you could say rightfully so, but like at the end of the day, like there's a chance that like we could look back 10 years from now and say, you know who we really are from a basketball program? We're the Vanderbilt of the SEC. Like we're
not even that bad.
We're a team in a really good basketball conference that is just kind of middle of the road. And I don't know. We may never get the vision and resources to be like a consistent Big 12 top 5 big team in the Big 12, and that just might be the case. Like
I hate to compare us to Vanderbilt, right? Because they suck at basketball and football. The only thing they're good at is baseball.
Really pretty good at football.
Yeah. So let's shy away from the Vanderbilt.
I think we could be better than last night's. But I could see a future where we're never consistently top 5, and we maybe throw that in once every now and then. But
I will disagree with all that, and I could say we could also be TCU. I think right now
in basketball, you're saying?
Yeah, because here's the thing: if you look at the trajectory of TCU and the other ads that were added to the Big 12, they did the exact same thing, and the ones that were successful in basketball, besides West Virginia, because West Virginia was a historically good program back to the Big East, right? Those teams that were added, they had a few rough years to begin with, and then they started moving forward. Now, TCU is a private school, has a lot more money than UCF does. However, it's all about decisions. It's all about where we're putting our money and our where our mouth is. We can afford to be mediocre in basketball as long as the football product is good for the Big 12.
What is
enough?
Big 12?
I guess, Roger, if we come in,
I'm sorry, there was 3 people talking, so I didn't get anybody.
So if we go into, say, this time next year, we're coming off of 8-4 season for football. What conversations are we having about Gus Malzahn?
Depends on the bowl game.
8-4.
I think it depends on the bowl game, but I don't think it's an 8-4 season next year because we have a lot.
I mean, I didn't think it would be a 7-6 season this year, but it was 7-6, or not even 6-7. But I'm just saying, like, these are the conversations. This is what I'm trying to say. If this happens, would we have the same conversation we're having right now about Johnny Dawkins? him being mediocre.
I don't think so, because Johnny Dawkins had 8 years, and he didn't.
Well, football is a shorter leash, and you know that.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me finish my thought.
Go ahead.
He didn't do well in the AAC. He had enough time for us to transition, and he didn't do well in the AAC. Gus Malzahn, there's a couple of things going on in that world. One, all the recruits that he's bringing in are not going to play as freshmen. You know that. There may be a few, maybe one or two that may play significant minutes the first 2 years in football. It's going to take a while. It's not like basketball. Basketball, the expectation is, hey, you can bring a few freshmen in and they can make a big difference, or a big transfer in and they can make a big difference right away. I don't see that same thing in football. So do I think we're having the same conversation? I don't think so. You guys might bring it up and we might have that argument at that point. But I don't see it as the same thing. We just transitioned. We just started being able to recruit at a P5 level. We the players that we are getting are going to take 2 years to get to significant minutes on the starting lineup. And the longer we go, the longer it's going to take for those kids to do that, because we're going to have higher quality talent at that point in the starting position. So when we get another 4-star and we get another 5, or we get our 5-star, or we get consistent 4-stars, they're going to have 4-stars in front of them that should be playing for a longer period of time. Now, the big hedge against that is NIL, but I feel like what's going to end up happening, where everything's trending in football, is that people are going to get paid, and they're going to get paid from the university and not just from NIL. And I think you'll start to see some transition there, and kids stick a little bit longer. That's just my gut on that. And that's, you asked the question, that's my answer on that. So do I feel like we're going to have the same conversation? No. But I think a lot of that's going to be depending on, how many times does Gus go into halftime or the last 2 minutes of a game? Because a lot of the games we lost in the last 2 minutes of the game. And he makes a quote unquote dumb coaching decision that we've complained about last season. Right.
So I guess, have we not said that every year he's been here?
He's been here what? This is his third season?
This is going into year 4.
He's going to year 4.
Like, I feel like this is why I ask it, because the same way we've had the same conversation about Johnny Dawkins. We have this conversation about whatever. I mean, I'm not versed in basketball. I just feel like with Gus Malzahn, this is the same conversation we've had for 3 years. And that's why I asked, if the same way it plays out this 4th year, questionable decisions again, because that's all he's shown us in the big moments. There's some questionable decisions so far. If we go through another year like that, how do we not have the same conversation? Because we know football is a shorter leash. How can we say,
we'll have the conversation, whether anything changes or not is completely different.
Oh, no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like that's what I was getting. I know. I don't think it's going to change, because I think, again, Gus is a little bit bigger of a name. He has a little bit more pull, in my opinion, in the college football world than Johnny Dawkins does from what I see. I find it because I asked this question earlier in the year, to me, it's Gus going to be the guy to take us to where we want to be in the Big 12. Do you guys?
I think that's undetermined, and I think that would be asking if more like Coach Calipari at Kentucky for a basketball equivalent versus I don't know who's mediocre. Who's the Iowa State coach? What's his name? I can't remember him.
In football or basketball?
Football.
Matt Campbell, is it still him?
Matt Campbell, right? So Matt Campbell, when he took the Iowa State job, he did okay at Iowa State for a little bit, and then he popped off and he said, "Hey, I'm going to stay at Iowa State instead of going to some of the big name jobs that he was going to go to, that he was being offered, right?" And he stayed there, and now they're talking about him being on the hot seat, right? If you're saying that's Ryan Day from Ohio State, it'd be like saying you're hiring Gus Malzahn, by virtue of who he is, gets a longer leash than Matt Campbell would at UCF. So I think it's a different conversation, because Johnny Dawkins is not the equivalent of Ryan Day or Gus Malzahn to your point, in the college football.
Yeah. I was saying it more so. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think that if Gus goes 8-4 or 7-5, 8-4, or something like that, there's going to be no serious conversation from the people that are higher than us that actually make the decisions to actually fire him, which there is obviously with Johnny, or at least, they're talking about a very short extension. There's going to be none of that. And I don't think most reasonable fans are going to be like, okay, at the end of next year, if he's 8-4, we're going to, talk about firing him. However, I think the seat gets warmer in a sense, not like in real world he's about to get fired, but just when you think about the expectations he's put on this upcoming season, he said it. I mean, he made all these coaching changes.
Went all in, he said, right?
He definitely went all in.
He set the expectations high, and the fan base already has high expectations every season, no matter what's going on. And then when you talk about all the transfers like KJ, and then on top of it, what Gus has said, it's going to be really tough to see this team only improve by 1 win or 2 wins and not have any sort of serious competition. If they're eliminated by, November in the conference race, I think the fan base is going to be mad. It's not going to be a serious firing conversation, but I think his seat gets proverbially warmer.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I guess, what I was really alluding to is just,
we're not on Johnny.
We're having the convo.
See you, Ben.
We're having the convo, is Johnny, like you said, Roger, you don't think Johnny's the guy to get us to where we want in the Big 12. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. That's what I meant. We might be having the same convo depending on how the year plays out.
But I think Gus still could be. I don't think Johnny at this point after 8 years, I don't think Johnny can be. And I said that before. I just don't see the chops.
Gus still has the excitement surrounding him. Johnny's excitement is gone. Like, I have no excitement about him being the coach one way or the other, whereas like Gus, I'm still every year he keeps getting me excited with all these new recruits, and he keeps one-upping the recruiting class, and then the transfer class getting, an SEC school's all-time leading quarterback. Like, these are just exciting moves that he keeps doing. And maybe football in general recruiting is more talked about, more exciting, more social media.
But these are the same conversations that were happening in Auburn. Like, he always is going to keep you excited by the recruit.
And what happened to Auburn? What happened to Auburn? They crashed and freaking burned. They crashed and burned, and they're all.
But again,
hold on.
This is my point. I don't want that. But
they crashed and burned, right? And yes. Coach Malzahn, when you're out there defeating, you could say Kansas would be an equivalent win for Coach Malzahn beating Alabama, but he was the only one that beat Nick Saban 3 times in the entire SEC. Only one.
All of coaching, everyone. He's the only person who's ever beat Gus Malzahn 3.
Johnny Dawkins hasn't been. He doesn't have a blue blood in his conference that he's beat consistently. If he beat Kansas 3 years in a row after they've had a chance to reload and everything like that,
3 years we've been in the conference with Kansas.
Well, I'm just saying. No, but I'm just saying if he did, let's say he did. Let's say he gets 2 years and he beats Kansas all three years in a row. Then you start having that similar conversation of Malzahn. To me, it's just not a similar.
The problem is the two programs aren't comparable at all. That's
I know, and that's why I've been trying to for the last 10 minutes.
Here's the reason go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry.
He totally ignored you. He's like, I've been trying to jump in for 10 minutes. He's like,
well, I just think Alan said it best right there with that one sentence. It's an uncomparable situation. A fair comparison actually would be how the fan base treated Josh Heupel at this point versus how they are treating Gus Malzahn at this point. And I get it. And I get it.
Are you talking about Heupel? I'm
talking about the acceptance. I'm talking about the acceptance of more than 3 losses in a season.
Are we talking about Heupel though at UCF or Heupel at Tennessee?
Heupel at UCF.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Heupel at UCF, and the I'm talking about the acceptance of the fan base of any loss, and the blame that was placed on Josh Heupel at that time versus what has happened. Seriously. In the 4+ losses that have happened, throughout the Gus Malzahn's tenure here, where the fan base doesn't really look hard at him. And it's because he's earned it, right? Because nobody knew who Josh Heupel was prior to – what's that?
Truthfully, I don't think he's earned it. I mean, that's just me.
Okay.
And
Excuse me. It's because he has the experience and because he has the name value
yes,
or whatever it may be.
I think it's name value, truthfully.
Yeah, name value or whatever it may be. Heupel didn't have that, backing. He didn't have that name value. Nobody really knew who he was prior.
Those are two different situations too, though.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's a comparison. That's a comparison. It's a closer comparison.
No, it's a closer comparison.
Johnny Dawkins.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, go ahead.
And I'll just say that I hope that if we decide to move on from Johnny Dawkins the way Stanford moved on from Johnny Dawkins, where he spent 8 years. 4 of those 8 years, he had 20 plus wins in the Pac-12. The 8 years since, Stanford has been a horrible basketball program, not a mediocre one, a horrible basketball program. They have been god-awful because guess what? It's really hard to recruit at Stanford. It's really hard to manage a basketball program at Stanford. Like people act like his 8 years at Stanford was he just had it easy on Easy Street because he was in the Pac-12. No, it's a hard program to recruit at, and so he had a lot of challenges there as well. And he had 4 seasons with 20 plus wins. 1 season with 26, 1 season with 24. He did some good things. He wasn't just completely mediocre. To say he was mediocre prior to UCF is just false. And we've talked about the 20 plus win seasons he's had here, but that doesn't matter. I guess it's just Gus Malzahn's going to get a lot more leash, and I think, truthfully, I think he deserves that leash because of who he's been. And I hope that the great recruiting classes and the excitement that Alan talked about, it translates to it's easy to say this, but more wins and less losses, really, because it just does seem like those tough losses that we've had over the last 3 seasons are a little bit tough to deal with moving forward when you got a guy like KJ Jefferson.
And one other thing I just want to say about Gus Malzahn, part of the reason why.
So since you hold on,
Okay.
before you move on from Stanford, 15-15, 24-13, 23-13, 19-15, 26-11, 15-16, 14-18. 1
And
NCAA tournament appearance.
Yeah.
1.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he kind of had that kind of like back and forth, but I mean, 26 wins in the Pac-12 isn't a
NIT champ.
Did we lose Ben?
NIT champion.
No, I hear him.
I'm sorry.
All right.
I hear Ben.
It doesn't matter. I mean, we all kind of like slightly agree and disagree at the same time, and there's really no reason to continue to talk about Johnny Dawkins' future at UCF basketball. There's nothing that he's going to be able to do to like think that anybody, like maybe besides me, but I don't even know if I necessarily agree with it anymore. Like that, you think he's going to be a long-term coach, but he's almost what? He's in his 60s, so like it's not like we're talking about some young guy.
Close to 70. Yeah, he's getting close.
It's not like we're talking about some young guy. I mean, that's one of the reasons why he wasn't highly considered, amongst other things. But I mean, like the Duke program, Johnny Dawkins is like a legend. And not just basketball, not just him as a player.
He saved Coach K, who then set up Christian Laettner and everybody else that came after them.
Right, but I'm saying when that transition happened, I mean, I can pretty much guarantee you that he was considered, not just because of who he was as a player, but who he is as a coach. He was considered to replace Coach K, but I think that they went with. They ultimately decided and really heavily moved towards that younger direction because they want somebody like Coach K when he started as a young guy, and they have John Shire, who is the youngest coach in.
By the way, today on Twitter, Duke fans are up in arms trying to get Johnny Dawkins back as an assistant.
Right. Yeah. Oh, they would take him in a heart. Any top level like basketball program in the nation would take Johnny Dawkins in heartbeat as the head assistant basketball coach, like as the top assistant basketball coach on their program. And guess what? They probably would pay him more than he makes as a head coach at UCF.
Probably.
I do for sure. All right, guys, we're an hour and 34 minutes in. Trey has completely extended this conversation about Johnny.
I just throw it out there, man. That's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to see where.
Well, you made it about Malzahn. You went all over the place, which I'm glad you're participating.
But the only reason I did was because, I'm just gonna say, when Ben said
one more thing by Trey,
when y'all said that he was negotiating off of recruiting, in my head I'm like, this sounds like just Malzahn.
Yeah.
Wait, that was my point, though. I'm sorry. I have to bring up one more thing.
Yeah,
there it is.
All right. Yes, part of his, you could say Gus's negotiation could be off recruiting, but at the same time, in the first year he had 9 wins and beat Florida.
All right, Nobra's killing it on the scroll today.
He had 9 wins and beat Florida. The second year he got us back to our first conference championship in 4 years. And then last year was kind of a throwaway because we talked about it being our first season, being all this transition. So I don't really think I know we've had a bunch of games that have been disappointing and then we felt that he blew it at the end or whatever. But in general, the success on the field has somewhat been there when you consider 3 straight bowl games, a big win over Florida, and then back to the conference championship. And then, obviously last year wasn't great, but none of us were expecting it. So I think there actually has been some on-field goodwill that he has earned more so than Dawkins.
To
me,
beating
the
when
Gators,
we were in the American,
certainly helped.
When we were in the American, we were the class of the American. So,
but we went downhill with Josh after that first year in the American. He brought us back to somewhere we hadn't been since 2018. Like in the conference title game.
Well, we could talk ad nauseum about Josh Heupel. I mean, I know we brought him up, so maybe this is something we save for next week because it's going to be a long off season. But True. We could talk about that. Seriously, put a pin in that because I have a lot of points about Josh Heupel I could bring up, but I'm not going to. So let's go ahead and transition to the spring game. Spring game is announced for April 12th. It is not being televised. I will be there in person. I hope you guys join me as well. I'm going to tell all the people that try to schedule me on Friday to
kick rocks.
I was trying to think of the E for everyone way of saying that, and it just wasn't happening. All the things in my brain were like, so excited about that. I hope to see you guys there. Also, Javon Baker and JRP both getting 30 visits for football. Baker, it looks like now
top 30 visits, like
or top 30 visits, yeah. But Baker, it looks like right now he's trending towards a 3rd round pick, which is good for him. Also made it worthwhile for him to leave. He's getting a lot of good press out there. And JRP is getting a lot of interest from the Seahawks. I don't know if they're trying to revisit their roots when they were successful with the Legion of Boom and what's his face?
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson, right? Because that's the type of player that he is. So I don't know if that's what they're thinking out there, but he's getting some play with the Seahawks. Also, football news, there was some more information that came out. We kept alluding to it about the stadium that's being upgraded. So UCF releasing some more information on that in their Board of Trustees meeting. For those of us that were season ticket holders, we did get a survey, which we talked about on here before. It looks like we're going to be adding about 58,000 square feet on the tower expansion of premium seating. That's going to take us from 900 seats to 1,236 seats, 2 new suites, suite levels, 34 more loge boxes, and 5 additional luxury suites, and a new press level. So I'm sure Brandon Helwig and the press guys will be interested in that, although Brandon is normally on the field getting great pictures. So make sure you check his stuff out. And basically, it's expected to net us about $2.4 million in additional revenue annually on top of what we already have. So that's good. we are looking at issuing bonds. So whenever you do this, usually the college will issue bonds. We're going to have $30 million in bonds and have a $70 million bank loan. Funny, that still doesn't equal to the $330 million that the Cows are spending on their stadium, which will end up having aluminum seating like we do, and the aluminum structure underneath after hearing so much about that. In fact, in 2017, the Cows went out to their fan base and asked them about a new stadium, and they were saying no to it because at that time it was going to have that aluminum basis as well. March 28th is a big day for UCF on this because they'll be deciding, the Board of Trustees will be deciding on whether to approve the bond and the lending, the bank loan, and all of that stuff in lieu of the tourist tax. As you may recall, TMO had a big win for, or TikTok Terry or Terry Mohajer, or however you want to say it. He had a big win with the Orange County Tourist Development Tax dollars, where he went and presented and got us $90 million. And as I don't like to say, and that money is slated for revenues above a certain threshold. So they're getting this money in anticipation of getting that money at a later date. However, the Hagel Football Gateway, so if you look at the images, you see this big spaceship looking overarching place. That's the Football Gateway. We'll have coaches' offices and a bunch of other stuff. The Nicholson Plaza tailgate zone, the Recovery Cove, which Trey was supposed to see but hasn't happened yet, which included hydrotherapy, offices for football staff, the football center, a new football center by Taylor Gehring. If you don't know him, check him out. He's a big player in the crypto space. And the upgrades for the Wayne Detch Center, which includes new locker rooms for the football players, upgraded locker rooms from them, is happening. And that will be the first to kick off. The first things you'll see on campus is you'll see the practice fields being moved. So those of you in E6 lot will lose some parking. And then for the tower itself, the timeline has been released with this Board of Trustees meeting. The design phase for the schematic design is going to be completed was completed in fall 2023. You saw the imagery for the spaces on that. Design and development is going to run through May 2024, so that's almost done. Then the construction plans and documents will all be listed by September 2024. And then the permitting and all of that stuff will happen from September to November 2024. And construction contracts will also help happen during that time frame. And finally, construction will start in December of 2024 and will last through June 2026, with a goal for everything to be open by the fall of 2026. So what that means is UCF has come out and said that they will be working on it on the off seasons. On the tower, existing tower will still exist. They will be adding onto those towers. We may see a return to our former stomping grounds in downtown Orlando and Camping World Stadium for a little while they work on this. So we may see one season there. But the exciting news is it's happening, right?
Oh,
and hey, yeah, it's happening, like the GIF. I was trying to do the GIF, There we go. We got the double thumbs up from Ben. It's happening, and it is slated to be completed for the 2026 football season, and we will finally have a lazy river. So,
Cove gating, baby.
yeah, there you go. Cove gating, which hopefully by that point I'll be able to afford. So that's exciting. A couple of quick hitters on stats that have come out. These come courtesy of Stats of War on Twitter about our running game, our vaunted running game. We averaged more than 3 yards per per carry before contact on designed rushes in 2023. What that tells you is the scheme and the offensive linemen did a really, really good job. We averaged 3.54 yards before contact per running play, which is ridiculous because that tells you if you run 3 plays, you're not quite there yet, but you're almost at a first down. How that stacks up against the rest, the next closest was Miami, believe it or not, at 2.98, Kansas at 2.91, and Miami should be pretty familiar with everybody. We have some coaches down there. Percent of design plays that generated a first down, FBS versus FBS. So this doesn't include FCS. UCF ranks 9th at 31% of the time. So first down rushes, 31% of the time we are getting a first down on our rushing attempts, which is really, really good. Percent of designed rushes that generated a first down before contact. UCF ranked number 5. K-State was number 1. That should sound familiar. We were the unfortunately the benefactor of that. 18.9% of the times, 18.9% of the time, we generated a first down before contact. And then this is an offensive line statistic. So those of you that were questioning the offensive line last year on the run game, which FBS offensive line and scheme provided the most opportunity to the rushers? So basically expected points added per rush before contact 2023, UCF ranked number 5 at 0.162 points added per rush before contact. So that was a measure of how good that offensive line was last year, even though and what to expect for next year. All right, with that, we're going to leave football. We're going to talk a little bit about baseball. I'm trying to keep it under 2 hours. UCF beat FAU 3-2 earlier on. We went 3-1 for the week. We won the series versus Kansas at Kansas in the cold. The first game we got pummeled, so it was not looking good for the Knights. As far as our pitching was concerned, then we came back. And our pitching staff pitched 2 great games, and our hitting finally in the cold came together. We're now 15-6 overall, 4-5 in conference, and something that everybody needs to consider. Bryant is actually playing really, really well. And although we are 4-5 in conference right now, our RPI still is sitting. I think it's either 4 or 6. Alan, do you remember?
Number 6 right now. Number 6. I was just typing that in the chat. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So the RPI is number 6 in the country. We played a lot of really, really, really good teams. The only time we really got showed up was our previous series, where we got skunked. But other than that, this team is doing really, really well. And you should be excited about this season because, as with basketball, one thing people aren't thinking about is that baseball, this is the number 3 league for baseball in the country. So this is a top league in baseball. The American was a good league in baseball, with ECU being a really, really good team. Houston typically was a really, really good team. The Cows, even we beat the Cows this year. They're a really good team and have played well in baseball as well. And so if we, win 4 out of the next 7 series, I could see us definitely being in the tournament, and potentially with this RPI for the rest of the season, there's a possibility that we host. So, the old Orto, it's a little bit too early for that on the road to Omaha. It's a little too early for that. But this team has the horses, the RPI, and the production. And what we saw a lot of this past series was production that wasn't predicated on home runs. We manufactured a lot of runs. So if you have a team that can hit home runs, which we've proven that we can do, and manufacture runs while playing good defense. That's really, really positive. Lex Bodeker, who's in first base now, the last series he had some critical errors that happened, but played much, much better this series. Estrella, who's been playing really, really well for us this year, was replaced in this series, and his replacement has played well as well. So we have some depth when it comes to being able to move pieces in and out. The pitching has always been the question, and they did well. Kansas is no slouch. They've played really well this season. And so things are looking up for the Knights. Ben, I know you love baseball, so I'm going to take a step back and let you wax poetic for a bit.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. I think a guy that I want to kind of give a shout out to and make sure that we highlight as far as pitching goes is Wiley Hartley.
Yes,
he's a guy that he was someone who was coming in as part of the backside rotation. Coming in relief at the beginning of this season. He got a midweek start. I think it was either Miami or FAU when we played them the first time. And he what's that?
Same difference.
Yeah, same difference, right? Yeah, I know. And so I think that was his first start of the season, was a midweek start. I think it was when we played at FAU. And he did great in that, and he's earned himself that weekend rotation now, as far as being a starter on the weekend. And I believe it was the third game of the series, because I know we played a doubleheader on Saturday.
We've been looking for a Sunday starter, and he's solidifying himself as the Sunday starter.
Yeah, he's been a real bright spot as far as somebody who has emerged as being capable of being a starting pitcher in this as far as the rotation goes. But the bright spot as far as the pitching overall has just been the relief pitching in general. Like we've had a great bullpen this season. Really been able to back up any struggles that the starters have had, and it hasn't been terrible. There's been a few games like Friday night that we got dinged up and really just ran into a buzzsaw of hits coming from the other team. There has been a few games like that, but pretty consistently the bullpen has been a bright spot of this pitching staff. And then as Coach Wallace said on the podcast with us prior to the season, something that was really important to him as far as defense is concerned is up the middle defense. And our catching has been spectacular. Sundin, Danny Nearai has been really good. I've said his name numerous times on this show. But just up the middle in general with Siska in center and
Pause.
in Australia and Kleska. So
Pause up the middle. Yes, I 100% agree with you.
And so, yeah, it's been good defense. And then, like you said, we've been able to manufacture runs in many different ways, which I think keeps the opposing defenses on their toes. And we had a good weekend finally getting a Big 12 season or Big 12 series win. And it's it's been a good season.
When you guys hear us laugh like that and kind of stop, it's because we've got something funny going on in the
podcast. Yeah, and Texas Tech is coming in this weekend. Preseason, Texas Tech was a top 25 team. They are not currently ranked in the top 25, but it's a very tough team. So it's just like every weekend in the Big 12 is going to be a tough series, and so hopefully we can go ahead and take another one.
And to your point, too, though, Wallace is known for his defense. So that's what we want to see. And we saw some really good plays during these games. The double play that we saw there. I mean, every weekend except last weekend, we saw some really outstanding defensive plays. So as this team gels, I expect to see more of that as well. The shifts have been on point. I know we're going in a little too much detail on baseball, but it's worth a watch, folks. You should be following this team. This can be a tournament team. it could be a team that hosts. Now, of course, I say that, and it's just like the free throw jinx when, the announcers go and they say, oh, this guy's been shooting great free throws, and then he misses too, right? So I'm knocking on wood. Josh is not showing up to any baseball games, and that's all I'm going to say to that. But, this team is worthy of you tuning in. So make sure you do that this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Trey, did you have anything to add on baseball? Because I know you're
like
other than taking it up the middle.
Like we were talking in the chat, I've officially retired for this season because apparently they don't need me to pitch. So I warmed up, I got loose a little bit, but maybe next year.
He did talk to Coach Wallace again at the game, and Coach Wallace said, "Nope, we don't need you, bro."
He said not this year, so.
They beat Miami without you, Trey.
Listen, I have 1 semester of sports left, so whenever he needs me, I'm gonna be in shape next year, though. I'll be ready.
Hold on, did you just say that you have eligibility left?
Baseball eligibility, yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I know we're being specific.
One semester.
All right. Alan, anything to say about baseball?
Nope. We can move on.
Yeah, Alan, just for the viewers, Alan is a football person. So, he makes the notes up, and like last week we put in the thing, bro, we need more on the other sports. So he's a football person,
football guy.
I expect him to be very much more so boisterous when it comes to the football season once that starts to roll around. But yeah, baseball is a fun team. Make sure you're watching them. I'm excited about that. One quick note for UCF. Rock'em Sox co-founder or founder Rob Starkman, and I'll put this under UCF Student Re-Education. For those of you that don't know, he was a student manager at UCF in 2011. He started making custom socks while he was a student manager at UCF, and has turned this into a business, a very successful business. In fact, they just updated their facility to a 36,000 square foot facility. So when you guys see all the custom socks that they put out at UCF, it's because he's an alum. And the genesis of all of this was him trying to find socks to match the team's uniforms when he was a student manager, right? And he's turned this into a very successful business. Now, the reason why Rob is a mention on the show is that he actually bought UCF's former basketball court. We just replaced it this past year, going into the Big 12, and he has installed it in his facility. So he now has UCF's basketball court in his facility where they can play on the court. So if you doubt whether you should be supporting Rock'em Sox and Rob's company, you 100% should not. He also had some sponsorships this past year for UCF. So make sure you're supporting Rock'em Sox. Buy those crazy socks, unless they are from our former quarterback who went to Oklahoma. You can throw all of those away for a sock boy. But everybody else, make sure you're supporting Rock'em Sox. They do a lot for the Kingdom, our NIL program. And it's a UCF alum that you should be supporting. Our other show that Alan was on with me, UCF Business Talk Live. It's all about supporting and building that network and making sure that you're supporting those local UCF business owners, because those are the folks that pour money back into the program. So if you can't do it yourself, make sure you're supporting those that can. And Rob and his company deserves your support. All right. Moving on. Alan, it's your time to shine with your Alan's Oxymoronic Stats of the Week. Alan, take it away.
Yeah, I just had one this time that I thought was somewhat interesting. What was that?
Such a letdown. Only one.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, there's not much going on right now. So I was just trying to look at some more trends from UCF basketball. And one that I found kind of interesting was basically how they perform in the first half versus the second half. And is it so this year at the end of the first half, and this is only in conference games. I only try to look at the conference because that was the more exciting part of the season, but they only held a lead 6 times at halftime this entire season. And they won the second half. Doesn't necessarily mean they won the game. They just outscored their opponent in the second half in 10 games. So 10 versus 6. So I think that kind of tells a little bit of the story of the season, that they, got behind, early in a lot of games and, try to make a furious comeback at the end. And a lot of times it fell short, but it seemed to be really a second half team this year.
So second half Randy is or second half Dawkins is coaching basketball. Is that what you're saying?
That's pretty much, but second half Randy won though a lot of those games. So yeah, good comparison.
Oh, wow, slight dig there with the second half Randy won the games.
Won a lot of those games.
All right, moving on. Let's get a quick update on UCF Sports as we pass through 2 minutes. UCF women's tennis finally beat Cincinnati 4-0 and West Virginia the 5-2, which West Virginia is well known for their tennis program. I'm side-eyeing everybody for those that are just listening. We play Houston next, so that's exciting. UCF women's tennis, unfortunately, has not had the season we would like them to have, but we continue to support them along the way. UCF men's tennis, however, they did lose to number 8 Texas 0-4. They beat Baylor 4-0 and play number 25 OSU next. Now, the thing about UCF men's tennis, they are still off to the best start of any UCF tennis team in history. And we've had some good.
That's what I was wondering.
Ones. They were 15-2. Yeah, that's a good question. They have been moving up the polls. They were in the 40s. They were then moved into the 30s. Obviously, Texas would have been a good win to help us there. However, we have a good opportunity with OSU coming up next. I think there's a little bit of bias with UCF men's tennis. Now, again, after last season, the previous seasons before that, they were doing well. We hope that they continue their process. Again, 15-2. I don't know how you're not ranked, but they weren't. And, they're playing number 25 OSU, so they have an opportunity. UCF softball. Wah, 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 wah. Love this team. Love Coach Bear. We continue to lose close games. We were swept by number 2 Texas. But again, these are 1-2 run games. I don't know what's going on with our hitting. We just, in the previous 2 years, we've had a lot of clutch hitting. We just can't seem to hit like we have in the past, and that sucks because
Jada Big 12.
The pitching, I mean, yes,
they're going against some studs.
No, I agree with you there, but at the same time, when it came to tournament time, when we're playing Michigan or we're playing some of these other teams, this team did well. So I'm a little surprised at the hitting. We do have a new hitting coach this year. We are 2-7 in Big 12 play this year. Thank you, Alan, for throwing that in there. I'm hoping the team can put it together, but a little disappointing. I mean, it's Jada Cody's last year. I was expecting big things for her. Some of the other team members, this is a very senior laden team. The expectation was that they were going to do well, and unfortunately they're not. So they do play Texas Tech next. So I'm going to continue to watch. They are exciting games. It's not like they're getting blown out. It's just they can't seem to get over the hump. Yeah. So
did I hear something that those games this weekend against Texas Tech are sold out, or was it last weekend that they were sold out? Or something?
Yeah, they were all sold out versus Texas.
The season tickets are
series was sold out. Okay, I'm sorry.
The season tickets are sold out for UCF softball. Have been for the entire season. The individual tickets. Now, here's the thing, folks. We have a very small stadium, comparatively speaking. That's the next area of upgrade once football happens, right? And what UCF has done has set aside. They've only sold so many season tickets, which have sold out, because they were charging. I think it was upwards of $100 to $200 per game for the Texas game for a revenue play, right? So if you don't have season tickets, you should have season tickets because those kinds of games will pay for the rest of your season, and this program deserves it. No matter what happens this season, and yes, they're having a down year, this program is continuing to build and is worthy of your viewing pleasure. And they only go 7 innings, although a lot of the early games in this season were run ruled, so they didn't even go 7 innings. They only went 5. It is worth it. So UCF softball against Texas Tech coming up. Make sure you're going out and checking them out. They deserve this program, this coaching staff, and these players deserve your support. And that's all we have for this week. We do have some exciting things coming up with that announcement that I've been kind of teasing for a while. You're going to see some additional people that we're going to be working with here coming up to bring you great content. There's going to be more content focused on our Big 12 mates and having them involved with what we're doing. We also have it's kind of funny, the ACC with the Clemson suit. Their lawyer last week, Clemson has now filed, as FSU did, to get out of the ACC. Different grounds. But they mentioned the big 3 in the state of Florida, and they listed UF, FSU, and UCF and left Miami out, which is kind of funny. Part of this new thing that we're going to be announcing is a big 3 podcast, and guess who's left out? The University of Miami. So UCF will be part of those big 3 discussions, and it really shows where UCF's place is in the college football world. So be excited about that. We'll pick up. We'll have some different types of content. Make sure you're liking. Make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're telling your friends. Make sure you're sharing. Make sure you're commenting, and make sure you're telling us what you want to see or hear on this program, because that's who we're doing it for. Thank you again, guys. Glad to have all of you on. Josh, we missed you. I hope you're playing with a sword in the woods, and an actual sword, nothing else. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Go Knights and
Charge on.
all right, baby. I guess I'm gonna have to pick up for Josh and